this idea of Allah covering the day with the night obviously isn't scientific, right? Scientifically, it's just that the sun is on the other side, or the planet has turned and now it's on the other side of the planet or whatever, right? So it's not that the night has covered the sun. Nothing covers the sun in that sense. But in our experience, from our eye, it looks like the night has overrun or taken over the sun. This is an important side note to make that I've made often, that the Quran is not speaking in the language of science. The Quran is speaking in the language of two perspectives, human perspective and Allah's perspective. Those are the two perspectives the ayat speak from. Sometimes the ayat are speaking from what you observe. You observe that the night took over the sun. From your point of view, that's what it looks like, and that's how it describes it. Sometimes Allah will speak from His own perspective. And that perspective is beyond even the perspective of science. It's the perspective that nobody else can have. Right? And that's usually when He talks about spiritual realities, or realities that are far beyond our ability to see. Then He'll talk about Allah's own perspective. And often when He talks about His perspective, He'll just let us know, you can't know the reality of it anyway. You don't know much about that anyway. But the thing is, the Quran, just like regular language, just language at large, we don't speak in scientific terms. That's not how people communicate. Yes, we live in a scientific age, yes. But we still don't speak in scientific terms. If somebody insults somebody else and you say, man, he got burned. Scientifically, there are no burn marks, first, second, or third degree. You don't have to call 911, but you still say they got burned. That's the language of people. We use imagery, we use example, we use parables, we use verbs that allude to other things, right? Man, he destroyed me in basketball. Oh man, I got killed when I watched that movie. Or whatever. You didn't, you're still alive, clearly. I don't know how that works. But we say these kinds of things. My favorite one is when grandparents say, my grandchildren stole my heart. And it's still there, alhamdulillah, So the point here is, we shouldn't be so obsessed in trying to find scientific phenomenon in the Quran. Yes, there may be some that are there, but that over-obsession, because we feel science is the supreme way of thinking in life today, and therefore the Quran will be legitimate if we find more and more scientific phenomenon in the Quran. That's a weak way of thinking. It's actually already acknowledging somehow that the word of Allah has to conform to the standards of modern science. And until it does, it's not really that powerful, or it's not as convincing. This is a problematic way of thinking for a number of reasons. Science changes. Science is changing from one century to the next to the next. The dominant theories about energy or motion or the very fundamentals of physics today might change in 100 years. We don't know, because they absolutely did 100 years ago. And at the time, the leading scientists of the world were absolutely convinced that is what the truth is. And anybody who disagreed with them were fools. And now those are the very theories that are considered myth, And so if we peg the Quran, which is timeless, to science, to show that the Quran is a miracle, and then science moves on, then we leave the Quran behind too, because then you just tied it to a theory that is no longer applicable, you understand? So yes, there may be very explicit phenomenon of nature and science that we can perhaps say there is some correlation there. Like for instance, Allah saying that the moon is in fact subservient to the sun, which is scientifically in a sense somewhat true. Its light depends on the sun's light, it reflects the sunlight, right? And it is gravitationally, the sun is actually the dominant player in the solar system, and everything else is actually a subsidiary, and they're following it, And so in that sense, sure. But taking it any further than that is a problem. Or even using that to say, aha, Quran is onto something that nobody had ever discovered before. I personally feel that that's a dangerous road to go down. What is then the miracle of the Quran? My personal view on the miracle of the Quran is that it's timeless. That it should not be pegged or associated with, you can validate the Quran from within itself, and then you can validate the Quran from outside things. Science is an outside thing. The first validation of the Quran is within itself, within its own speech, within its own powerful messaging, within its own language. There is something that is timeless, that if anybody ponders, they will come to the conclusion, وَلَوْ كَانَ مِنْ عِنْدِ غَيْرِ اللَّهِ لَوَجَدُوا فِيهِ اخْتِلَافًا كَثِيرًا. They'd be convinced this can only be the word of God. There are 3 threats in the Quran. Please don't forget that. If you study the entire Quran, there are 3 kinds of threats, 3 kinds of warnings. The first warning is, nation, if you don't listen to your prophet, you're going to be destroyed. That was the warning given to the people of Nuh, Lut, Salih, Shu'aib, alayhim salam, Fir'aun, you name it. Those were the people that were given warnings. If you don't listen, your nation shall be destroyed. Right? That's the first kind of threat in the Quran. The second kind of threat is what will happen to people on Judgment Day. Okay? The death, by the way, is not a threat. Because death is a reality. I'm not threatening you one day you'll die. Thanks, I already knew that.
That's not a threat. So the first threat is destruction of nations. The second threat is Judgment Day, where you will be held accountable, you will be brought to trial. The trial is the threat. The third threat in the Quran is hell. So there's three. Destruction of nations. What else did I say? Let me hear it from you. Day of Judgment, and then hell. Now, the thing about destruction of nations is, do people know when it's coming? No. وَلَيَأْتِيَنَّهُمْ بَغْتَةً وَهُمْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. It will come to them all of a sudden and they'll have no realization. The mercy of Allah is that our messenger was the last messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. With him ended the destruction of nations. There is no more destruction of nations. That's done. Okay, so that's a mercy from Allah Azza wa Jal, that door of threat closed forever. The last time those threats were issued, they were issued to Quraysh. That's it. There's no more that one nation will be completely annihilated or wiped out or whatever else. Okay? So when they especially see a flood happen in some country and see Allah ka azab hai, dekho zara, shame on you. That's not what Quran says. That's what your, Pindu interpretation was. You need to stop doing that. That is a test from Allah, not an adab of Allah. We don't say that's an adab from Allah. That's a torture from Allah. We don't say that. Okay? Now, anyway, so there were three threats. One of them comes to people, they have no clue. They have no clue what's going on. An earthquake came, a flood came, nobody even knows what's happening, and all of a sudden they're done. Isn't it? But if you look at these ayat, كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. They will know. Oh yeah, they will know. Which means there are two punishments where people will what? They will know. I told you how many threats are there? Three. But one of them, people won't even know what's happening. Which is which one? Destruction of nations. What are the two left? Day of Judgment? Hellfire. When Judgment Day begins, people are terrified. Oh, and then they know, oh my God. This is, and وَوَجَدُوا مَا عَمِلُوا حَاضِرًا. They will find everything they did standing in front of them. They will know. But even that isn't knowing until they see hell. Because right now they're seeing you're guilty. What are they not seeing? The jail that awaits you. When they see that jail, then they realize, no, that when I realized I'm guilty, I still didn't realize how serious it was until I saw that jail. There are two levels of realization for criminals. One on Judgment Day, the other on the Day of Resurrection. One on Judgment Day, the other on the day they see, at the end of it when they see hellfire. One of them is كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. The next one is what? ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. And ثُمَّ is tarahi, it's a long time. Thumma doesn't just mean moreover. It actually means then after a long time, they'll realize again, oh, wait till they see it again. In this, Allah has basically said to the criminals, you are going to be singing a different tune on Judgment Day. Wait till you see it. Oh boy, and wait till you see what? Hell on top of that. And you'll notice as the surah continues, Allah will first describe Judgment Day, then He'll describe hellfire. He'll actually Himself do tafsir of كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ, and then what? ثُمَّ كَلَّا سَيَعْلَمُونَ. He'll explain it Himself. Subhanallah.